Okay, so Steve, can I ask you to turn it off? Thank you so much. No, no, the last, yeah, that's it. Okay, so here we are, and you can at times, if you want, you can close your eyes and believe that you're there. Just smell the smells and feel the wind. But we'll talk about the beautiful ship that you have there in the middle. We'll talk about it a little later. It's quite a treat. I don't care for a very large cruise ship. This is 76 people, plus 80 and some. Yes, thank you, Danielle. I couldn't, yeah. Plus 82, I think, crew member.
Can you put closed caption on?
Pardon?
Closed caption.
Closed caption, very good idea. Let me do that. I think it's this one, if I remember. Yes, there we are. Good idea. So hopefully it follows what I say. It doesn't seem to be. I'm searching. Okay. Again, I have to stress that it translates pretty well the regular speech. It doesn't translate well the last names or the location names. So sometimes it's really fancy, kind of strange. So don't blame me. It's a machine. So let's look at the trip that we're going to take. Sorry, but okay, here we are. And so you can see, starting from Istanbul in the upper right corner, we're going to go down through the Sea of Marmara. And there are some flyers on the seat, so if you can take some of them and put some on another seat so other people can have them too. Thank you so much, I appreciate that. So we go down through the Sea of Marmara and the Dardanelles along the western coast of Turkey, and we'll go down all the way to Kusadasi, which is also Ephesus, and then from there to Bodrum. Then we'll go west to Delos, the island of Delos, go south to Santorini, go back up to the Peloponnesus to Mycenae, and then we finish in Athens. I did this trip in 2010 with my husband. And so many things have changed since, and I will stress a few things that have changed. The trip was wonderful, was with the Sea Cloud 2 that you saw on the front page, but we'll see more images of that. And I'm just trying to think if I have done. So sorry, I'm going to do something here to change because I want to make sure I enable the. It doesn't ask me to enable. So I don't know. Hopefully the videos are going to work because normally it's supposed to ask me. So there we are. It's coming in just a second. There we are. Oh, come on, baby. Yeah. So just a few words. We're going to talk about Istanbul and the various names that Istanbul went through. So in around 6600 BCE, it was named Lygos and was founded by Thracian tribes on what is called the Cerealia Point, which is where the Topkapi Palace is. In 667 BCE, it became known as Byzantium, or in Latin, Byzantium. It was founded by Greek colonies from Megara. For your information, Megara is close to Corinth, so just south of Athens. In the 3rd century of our era, it became known as Augusta Antonina by Septimius Severus. But that didn't last very long because Constantine came along, and in the 4th century moved the capital of the Roman Empire to what became Constantinople, and was called by him as the New Rome, Inea Romi in Greek. They didn't care very much for that name, and so in the 5th century, Theodosius II renamed it Constantinople for, of course, with the name of Constantine, who had been such an important emperor. When the Ottomans took over Constantinople, they kept a pretty similar name officially for quite a long time, and we called it Constantiniye, which doesn't mean the city of Constantine, but the place of Constantine. So the suffix of the name ye means a place. And then finally, in 1923, they decided to call it officially Istanbul, which was already used, by the way, by most people. But Istanbul typically was naming the old town, the old city in the very center. But it generalized it for the whole city. And it comes from the Greek phrase, in the Stin Poli. And so Istanbul. By the way, Istanbul is nowadays the largest city in Europe, if you include the Asian part of it. Of course, Istanbul is straddling the European side and the Asian side. So if we take the whole city, it's the largest city in Europe. If you take just the European side of it, then it's number 4 or 5. A quick history page. Byzantium gained its independence from Athens in 356 BCE, and then became officially part of the Roman Empire in 73 of our era, and then proclaimed the capital of the Roman Empire on the 11th of May, 330. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, the city was sacked and pillaged by the Crusaders. And a lot of people consider that the Fourth Crusade had that as a goal, because at that time, Constantinople was known to be so rich that they were really looking at all that wealth. On the 29th of May, 1453, the very young Sultan Mehmed II, called the Conqueror, captured Constantinople and declared it the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. And we'll see a little bit the progression of the Ottoman Empire in a minute. From 1520 to 1566, under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the city saw incredible improvement on not only practical, but also decoration. He was a man who loved art and really wanted his city to be worth his own reign. In 1880s, Constantinople was connected to the rest of the European railway network, which was a huge thing at the time because it facilitated all the trips and facilitated the coming of tourists and of commerce to Constantinople from the Western Europe. On the 1st of November 1922, the Sultanate was abolished. And on the 29th of October 1923, it was the establishment of the Turkish Republic with Ankara as its capital. Istanbul at that time remained the economic capital, if you want, but the political capital became Ankara on the Asian side of Turkey. Mustafa Kemal Pasha, that was known as Atatürk, became the Republic's first president. And he changed a lot of things in Turkey, really tried to separate the secular part of the government from the religion. He didn't want the religion to influence the government as it existed at that time. And of course, this has been reversed with the now President Erdogan. So he became the first president. Also, he improved the education. Ataturk, he did a lot of things for the country to bring it to, let's say, the level of the rest of Europe, trying to modernize the city a lot. Lately, the Recep Tayyip Erdogan was prime minister since 2003, and since 2014 has been the president and is not ready to step down. He imprisons every rival who tries to come and challenge him. So he has linked again the government with the religion, really pushing women to wear the veil again. And is a very fierce president to the rest of the population, but has great support from the poor population in the countryside population. So here I have to show you a map, and I love these maps, and hopefully I can work. It's supposed to, yes. So you see the evolution of the Western Empire. The dates are on the lower left. And you can see how the landscape at that time changed completely. I'm going to let it run twice so that you can see how by 1270 it's really reduced to almost nothing, 1400. The Ottomans are already surrounding the place, but Constantinople had very big walls and big defense, and so they were not able until 1453 to take the city. I love these animated maps. It's really
He did so well. Amazing.
no, it really is very good. Can you see that? There are some seats at the back here. Yes. So you see the incredible changes, and when I'm preparing these classes, to me this is always fascinating because it shows you how little we are, that we can reach such incredible power and importance in the world and then come down to nothing. And it's a repetitive cycle that you see with Rome, you see that with Constantinople, you see that with the Ottoman Empire, that unless you really keep up with everything, it disappears. So here is a view of Istanbul. This is the Sahara point that you see. You see the dome, the minarets and the domes of the dome of Hagia Sophia. And beyond that, you have the palace. And so you have on your right, the water that goes there is known as the Golden Horn. And what you have on the right is the Bosphorus that goes from the Sea of Marmara to the Black Sea. It's an absolutely fascinating city. Just here, a satellite view of, so we are just here at that little point here. And this is the Sea of Marmara, the Dardanelles, and then the Aegean Sea. And what is in the clouds is the Black Sea. There we are. So that's the Bosphorus. And the Seraglio point is here, so with the Golden Horn over there. Ankara is way over here. Here is a map of Istanbul at the time of at the time it was called Constantinople, I should say, with all the monuments, and I'm just going to locate them for you so that you have an idea. So the Great Palace, that was really the place for the Byzantine, or let's say the emperors of Constantinople was there. Very, very large building. The Amastrianum was in fact the forum of Byzantium. So this is where all the commercial things were taking place. And it hasn't been dug up yet. Some things have been built on top of it, but we don't have much idea of how it looked, if you know, because they have not yet reached that point too. Hagia Sophia is there. The Palace of Antiochus, which was another palace of the emperors. The Bukoleon Palace that you can see the ruins of very well along the harbor was another palace and quite an intricate place. Then on the top there you have another palace far away outside of the walls that were built later on. And then the Savior in Cora, will see it's a wonderful church that originally was outside of the walls, and then when they rebuilt and was included in it. And it has the most extraordinary mosaic that you can imagine. So early Byzantine, so this incredible defense system of the Roman city was equally matched by its impressive architecture. It was absolutely unbelievable. And I think if we haven't been there, we cannot even imagine how it looks like. You have, of course, the Greek Orthodox Cathedral, Hagia Sophia, that you see there in the center, which is now a mosque again. We'll talk about it later on. And then here you have the harbors. You had actually two harbors, one that was for passenger ships, if you want, and the other one was mostly commercial. And of course, a very important feature is that very large hippodrome. Hippodrome you can still locate because it has kept its shape. It is now a very large square. But the hippodrome was one of the main features and entertainment place in Istanbul, in Constantinople. And here is an idea of the harbor. Here you can see, this is the Great Palace. So a very large structure and just next to the hippodrome. Of the Great Palace, unfortunately, there is very little left, but just an idea of the beautiful mosaics that were covering the grounds and the walls. So here you have a small museum of the Great Palace mosaic, including the very known mustache man. So extremely realistic type of mosaics. And there is, of course, the hippodrome, later picture in 1580, so after the invasion by the Ottomans, shows what is left of it. But what remains are the obelisks that still mark the places where the hippodrome used to be. This way, of course, you had all the horse races, but you had other races too. There are lots of remains of the Roman times, including the Bukoleon, and then, for example, the Valens aqueduct that is quite impressive, and that was bringing, of course, the water to the city. Between 527 and 1453, this is more or less the way Istanbul looked. It was already very large for the time. Here is a section of the Bukoleon Palace, and down below what is left of it. You can only normally see the outside, but you can, for those that know, and some of the scholars that have studied the building, there is some treasures that you can find when you enter the walls. There is somewhere, I don't remember where it was, they had reconstructed in 3D the Bukoleon Palace, and you can visit it. It was quite incredible. Also, they had a system to keep water, just make sure to uh, store enough water for the city, and that was particularly for that part of the city. It was the Basilica cistern, which is absolutely amazing. You can see the picture on the upper left that was built in 532 of our era, and has that kind of amazing kind of reddish orangey color when you get in. And the reuse of some of the earlier sculpture that show the Medusas, and you can see one is on the side and one is on its head. But these were the recycling of older buildings and temples. The chamber is about 453 feet by 213, so it's very large. It's supported by 336 columns, marble columns. And then, of course, we can only admire Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia, that was at the time the largest church ever built. And it's really interesting because when you think of Anthemius of Tralles and Isidorus of Miletus, they were really lucky. First of all, they followed really the quest of Constantine, Justinian, sorry, who really wanted to build the largest church in the existing world at the time. But about 10 years later, the dome fell off. And fortunately for both of them, they were dead, because otherwise they would have been killed. It's for sure that the emperor would not have accepted that his treasure would falter that way, but it was rebuilt with some support. It's an incredibly large dome. It's larger than the Pantheon. And that's what they were looking at, is try to understand the structure of the Pantheon and mimic it there, but at much higher height. And it's all surrounded by windows. It's absolutely superb. It's incredibly impressive. I had learned about it, I had read about it, but you get in and you still can't believe it because it's so large when you get in. The minarets that you see around it were added, of course, after the conquest by the Ottomans. First two and then two more were added, and it's, of course, where the call for prayer takes place. The height of the dome is 184 feet, and the diameter is 112 feet. So when you get in, you have that incredible feeling. This is seen from the upper gallery. The one on the left gives you an idea of the very large extent of these domes. You have the main dome, and it's surrounded by slightly smaller domes and then half domes. The large signs that are hanging there were actually added in the 19th century. Of course, at the time of the occupation by the Ottomans and the conquest by the Ottomans, it was immediately turned from a church to a mosque. And of course, as the Quran doesn't allow the showing of images of human beings, they covered all the mosaics and the frescoes that are there. They were whitewashed, so they put some stucco on top of it. And this was only removed at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th. it has since 2022 been returned to use as a mosque by Erdogan against all, because it was a museum since the time of Ataturk, and against everybody's horror, if you want. Erdogan decided, no, it has to come back to a mosque. It was covered by the UNESCO and protected, and definitely under the umbrella of the UNESCO, there were continuous repairs and improvement of the building. And so they were very scared, and still are, that now being a mosque again, that they're going to let go the mosaics that are there. And so right now, when there are services, they cover all the mosaics with white drapes. And so they're really scared that this is going to finally damage these beautiful works of art. On the left, you can see that half dome there with a wonderful mosaic of the Virgin and Child that was made in 867. What they call the Theotokos, who is the Greek way of showing the Virgin, the Mother, and the Child. The whole decoration is absolutely beautiful. Look at the details of these capitals and these columns with incrustation of different mosaics, and the beautiful stucco decoration all around the capital. And as I mentioned now, and you can see it very large there, is the mihrab from where the imam is going to give his speeches and the prayers. The two very large candle holders that you see there were brought in by Suleiman. Here's a view from down below, so you have an idea of as you can see on each of these triangular shape there, that are in fact the transition from the round dome to a square plan on the floor, if you want. They call pendentive. They are some angels. These are seraphs that have all these wings that are surrounding them, and they have just in cleaning it found the last face of the seraph that was hidden still under some of the whitewash that dated before. So all around on the different gates that get into Hagia Sophia, you have these beautiful mosaics. Here you have Theotokos, so the Virgin and Child, with Justinian on the left, and Constantine on the right, that are offering the making of the church, if you want, to the Virgin. And another entrance, the emperor kneeling before Christ. And that's at the Imperial Gate Mosaic. And Christ is surrounded by the medallion of the Virgin Mary on one side and John the Baptist on the other. And everywhere you look, you have still these amazing, very early mosaic dating from 600 all the way to here you see 1055. Christ with Constantine Monomachos and the Empress Zoe. And on the other side, Emperor John II and Empress Irene. Don't forget that Greek was the language there, not Latin. So in 1453, as we said, Mehmed invaded Constantinople, and I wanted to show you here the evolution of the Ottoman Empire and its decline. Because again, we have an incredibly powerful mass, and then we see how it's going to be reduced under a lot of pressure from the rest of Europe. And you see when we reach the end of the century, and then we have the First World War, and suddenly, kaboom, there's almost nothing left. But we have to understand that the influence that they had has remained. As far as architecture, as far as culture, they were very quite important. So I let it go one more time so you can enjoy. And if it wasn't for Vienna that resisted, we would have been part of the Ottoman Empire too. They came back twice to try to. They came back twice to try to invade the rest of Europe. See, they had Egypt and they had the whole north of Africa. And in fact, it's after the fact that the Ottomans had to pull out of the Middle East that the Middle East was redesigned and is the landscape, the actual landscape that dates back from then. Okay, a few names because we'll hear about them. Muhat was the father of Mehmed II, who was in his early 20s when he conquered Istanbul or Constantinople at that time. And here is a picture by Bellini, the great Venetian painter of Mehmed. And then a little, you go down Muhat and Mehmed II, Selim the First, who is the father of Suleiman the First, Suleiman the Magnificent, who we're going to talk about later on in the year. And he is, and you see that the turbans are getting bigger and bigger. And that's really actually the size of the turban meant the power, the grand power of the Sultan. So the Ottoman Empire started really, was defined in 1299, but as I mentioned, was surrounding Constantinople, only took it in 1453 and lasted to 1922. This is the Seraglio point, so that you have an idea of the incredible quality of important buildings. So here we have the Bosphorus, the Golden Horn, and the whole green part that you see there is the Topkapi grounds. So you have, we'll see it in detail. And then just next to it, you have the Hagia Sophia and then the Blue Mosque, which is very close to it. And then different mosques, you have the Sultan Ahmed, the Blue Mosque, which is incredible, then the Mosque of Suleiman, a new mosque there, the Grand Bazaar that we'll visit too, the cistern, so you have an idea where it is. We'll see Aya Irina, that we already mentioned before, by the way. It was one of the proofs of the period of iconoclasm in the Greek Orthodox Church. And the Spice Bazaar that we'll visit too, the Hussein Pasha mosque, and then the Mosque of Silim we won't see just on the map, but it gives you an idea of the accumulation. You can't do 2 steps without seeing at least the roof of something incredible. Most of what we see when we look at the point is seen from the tower that used to be the highest point of Istanbul. It's now, of course, passed by a lot of modern building, but that tower was very important and has been portrayed by Arasowski, who is the painter we're going to see in early October that Crimean painter that is very known in Istanbul because he's the only one who ever made paintings of the place, because there is no school of painting in Muslim countries except for calligraphy and vegetation. But he spent some time in Istanbul, and his name, I have a Turkish friend, and when I said Alvazovsky, of course, Alvazovsky, everybody knows Alvazovsky in Istanbul, in some wonderful paintings. Also, it gives us an idea of when you see the crowd that is sitting under the shade of that tree, how they were dressed at the time. And this is showing already before Ataturk, the change that was happening in Istanbul of trying to mimic what was happening in the rest of Europe. So they were modernized, and you have some people that are still covered, the women that have the face covered, but you have some that are not, and just wear a hat. And here is the famous Galata Tower, which is on the other side of the Golden Horn, but from which you have the best view of the whole Golden Horn landscape. It used to be, as I mentioned, the highest point in Istanbul, and you can climb up, which we did. And that's where you have really a pretty good view. And there's a little restaurant there too. Now I have to talk about somebody that is very special. I'm talking about Mimar Sinan. Sinan Aga, the grand architect. He is the one who is responsible for the particular architecture of mosque, the type of mosque that you find in Turkey, but also in some other part that were under the obedience of Turkey for a while. Everywhere else, the mosques are rectangular. They are hallways. But because Sinan had the example of Hagia Sophia in front of him, he was really challenged because there was that belief that the Muslims were not able to build the same way as the rest, the Occidental people, if you're the Christian. And so he really he was challenged by that and decided to mimic the architecture of Hagia Sophia as mosque. And it's from that time on that him and his followers built these incredible buildings that we'll see a few of them that are built after the pattern of Hagia Sophia. He was born, let me see if I have his date. So he was born in 1488 in Istanbul, if we can call it, and died in 1588. So he was 100. So that's an incredible lifespan for that period for a man, but had a great vision and not only did he build the largest and the most beautiful mosque, as well did the Blue Mosque is by one of his followers, by the way. But he built the one by the Suleiman Mosque. He built bridges, quite a bit of bridges, but also a whole series of other buildings that he's very known for. Just to show you that probably his masterpiece is one that is on the western part of Turkey, almost at the western border of Turkey, the Selim Mosque in Edirne. And I just bring it in because you will see that, in fact, the Blue Mosque is a copy of this one. But you can see 4 huge minarets and an incredible interior, very large space. And it's incredible when you think we have 2 architects in the crowd that they can appreciate what it is to build on such scale. Absolutely amazing at the time. In Istanbul, he built the Süleymaniye Mosque, so the mosque that was dedicated to Suleiman, with 4 minarets. You were not supposed to have more minarets than the mosque in Mecca. And so we'll see that one mosque is going to have 6 minarets, and that was not supposed to happen. So they built one more minaret at Mecca for that reason, to make sure it remained the ones with the most minaret. Here is the interior of the Suleiman Mosque. Again, all mosaics, but you can appreciate also the light. The light is incredible. It's a hot place in summer, and it has enough, it shows light, but you don't have a feeling of heat, if you want. And around the mosque are 2 mausoleums, the one of Suleiman the Magnificent and the one of his favorite wife, Roxolana, with their tomb. And then the other huge mosque that is almost next to Hagia Sophia was built by a follower of Sinan, one of his students. And this one is known as the Blue Mosque, which is absolutely huge. We'll see it again, and was built according to the same pattern as Sinan had started. And this was dedicated to Sultan Ahmed. So, the interior courtyard, where people would gather, wash their feet and their hands and their face before entering the mosque. And you can enter as long as there is no service at the time. You have to leave your shoes outside, but you can enter. And again, look at the space. The number of domes, so you have a main dome and then some smaller ones and then half domes. The lower stories are illuminated by 200 stained glass windows. And then finally, another one, much smaller mosque, but is close to the bazaar, to the small spice bazaar, still built by Mimar Sinan, is the Rustem Pasha Mosque, which is small. It's actually dedicated to the husband of his favorite daughter, and has a name, but it's small, but it's incredibly, perfectly balanced. The proportions are superb, and it's covered with Iznik tiles. The Iznik tiles are these tiles that were made in Iznik, former Nicaea, and that became really one of the great form of art known in Turkey at the time. So you have all the walls are covered, and you find these tiles everywhere. I brought you some examples there on the table. But again, you have the mihrab, so with the stairs to go up and be able to talk to the place. And then you have a little cage area for women who wanted to come and attend the prayer. Here are some examples of these Iznik tiles, absolutely beautiful. They changed the way of making tiles from using clay to using quartz. And quartz brought a special light, if you want, because you have, I don't know if it's mica or whatever, it's often mixed with quartz. And so it almost shines. It's absolutely beautiful. Just next to the Rustem Pasha mosque is the spice market. And you have also, of course, it's along the Golden Horn. So you have all these little boats. But you go into the spice bazaar and you can see, I mean, the colors and the smells that are just incredible. You can go around and I feel like a doggy, you know, because it's so potent. It's incredible and very beautiful too. You see just the different colors. And all the figs and the fruits and the candies, because they love candies. I was trying to bring you some baklava and they didn't have any. No, But that's part of, but they also all kind of candies. They have a sweet tooth, there's no doubt. Now, next to the Spice Bazaar, there is, of course, the Grand Bazaar, which is absolutely huge. Here's the Grand Bazaar that was built between 1455 and 56. And you have a plan there. There are 66 streets that make the Grand Bazaar. You can get easily lost in that place. And again, you know, it's full of noises and the colors and the just the whole atmosphere is you can get high, you know, almost tipsy. So here is the golden apple. This is where all the jewelry stores are, and they have very beautiful jewelry. And then again, you have all these goodies, nuts and candies. You can find anything. I mean, you have place where they have leather jackets and leather everything. They're just a whole area in the bazaar. You find everything there, and it's always very much alive. And also, what you have to realize, there are people that go around and serve tea. So when you get into one of these stores, for example, they immediately going to call a guy and they offer you tea. And the tea can be different. It can be mint tea or it can be apple tea and so on. So it's very polite to drink the tea, and it's excellent too. So here is now going back up the Topkapi Palace, which is really huge and was built in 1459. So very shortly after Mehmed II took over Constantinople. And it's made of a whole series of courtyard. So you don't have one gigantic palace, but you have pavilion. And it's clever because it's easier to manage as far as air conditioning, in natural air conditioning, if you want. But so you enter through this gate, and then that's the second gate, and that's the third gate, and we'll see them all. And each area has different buildings. Here is the beginning of the Sea of Marmara. So you have a magnificent view from there. Beautiful gardens and fountains. Here is the little church that we see, Santa Irene. And then the palace is really here. The most important part of the palace is in that area. And the kitchen here, very large kitchen. So you enter through the imperial gate. And when you come in, you can see the imperial mint. So this is where they were minting the money. And on the left, you will see Santa Ayavini church, which is one of the oldest one that remains besides Hagia Sophia, was built in 548, and is one of the last testimony of the iconoclastic period that happened twice in Constantinople at that time. Twice there was the idea similar to what happened in Islam later on, that we were not supposed to see any engraven image, and that meant the human being should not produce any engraved image. This is the second commandment. And so they, at that time, burned all the icons that they could find, put their hand on, and defaced all the mosaics and frescoes that existed in the churches. And so you can see that the previous mosaics was replaced by just the sign of the cross. And then you go through the Gate of Sanitation that was built in 1542. And you have there another courtyard, including the kitchens. And here you see the kitchen with all the chimneys. So each of these, of course, were ovens where they would cook these food for, I don't know, hundreds of people. And there you have the Tower of Justice. So this was the building dedicated to the justice system. Earlier, you would have found running free in that area peacocks and gazelles that would just feed on the grass. Then you go through the Gate of Felicity, and this one was a very difficult to get in. You had to have the personal permission of the Sultan to get in. And so even the great vizier, who was like his prime minister, couldn't get in unless the Sultan gave the particular permission to go through. And you get into then a series of pavilions. And I'm just going to show it to you because there's so many of them. But here's the Conqueror Pavilion, which is being turned into the museum. And if you remember, years and years and years ago, Topkapi, do you remember the movie Topkapi? Okay, this is supposed to be happening in that Conqueror Pavilion, where they go by the roof and go into to steal the Topkapi dagger that you see there. And so in that museum, you have a whole series of beautiful daggers and jewelry, including the spoonmaker diamonds that is only 86 carats. So be proud when you have a 2 carats diamond. This is 86, and it's one of the largest, if not the largest, in his particular coloring. So it's a whole series of rooms, and you can go and you see pearls and diamonds and all kind of particular precious stones. In another building a little further, you have what is called the sacred relics, and these are relics of Mohammed. And different things. You have a cloak that belonged to Mohammed. You have 2 of his swords, a bow, 1 tooth, a hair of his beard, his battle sabers, and an autographed letter, and then other lesser relics. So you see the autographed letter up there on the right. So these were supposed to be seen only once a year by the Sultan, but this has been relaxed since, and you have, I don't know actually if now, I think they again have restricted the entrance to that part of the museum. When I was there, you could come in, no problem. And then you go into the private quarter of the Sultan, and this is the courtyard of the eunuchs. Eunuchs that were mostly African that had been enslaved and brought in and then castrated because they would be a safer guard for the women. And not only that, but also as they very often would get the privileged ear of the Sultan, they were not fearing any rivalry because they could not have children, and so they couldn't install a dynasty. And so that was a safe way also for them. But these would become sometimes, the smart ones would become extremely powerful. But it is in these quarters that they were guarding, and they had their quarters, and they were the one guarding all the wives as well as the concubines. But it's absolutely superb. All these walls are covered with these Iznik tiles. This is the Gate of Cards entrance. Inside the harem. In the harem, of course, we have to forget the very biased view of the Europeans on the harem. You had the different wives of the Sultan, and you had tons of children running around. But the mother of the Sultan lived in the harem too, had her quarter there. And then you had different area with the odalisque, the concubine, so that were not married to but would serve too. This is the imperial hall with the throne of the Sultan, from which he could sit there and see spectacles, but he would also receive some foreign visitors and ambassadors. And then a small room there, the fruit room, because it's all called that way because you have all decoration with fruits. what you see there, the throne, looks more like a sofa. And we have to realize that that habit of the sofa comes from Turkey. There are two different kinds. You have the sofa and the divan. And the divan is actually a bed with cushions against the wall where you can sit, but you can also sleep. The sofa is just a piece of furniture that permits more than one person to sit on and has a back. And so both the fashion of sofas and divan comes from Turkey. And we'll see that the divan was originally the name for a political group, mostly the important advisor to the Sultan. So again, these are different kiosks, different places where the Sultan could refresh himself in the summer, just change his mind, listen to poetry or read poetry. The upper terrace with fountain and all very researched. And then, of course, they had tulips. And we have to remember that tulips, though it probably came with the Ottoman from the East, but it is from Turkey that the tulip was imported to Germany and the Netherlands and became quite an industry, particularly in the Netherlands. And we'll see that it is one of the favorite motifs of the Iznik tiles is the tulips. You see them on almost all of them. And these are particularly typical with very narrow and pointed petals. These are very lovely. So now we have to cross fingers. I don't know if it's going to work because he didn't do it, but are the Janissaries. So I don't know if it's going to work or not. It doesn't seem to be. Maybe, yeah. But the sound is not coming. My fault, I should have. So anyway, we were privileged to listen to a whole concert of these Janissaries, who were some of the most important troops around the Sultan. They were typically young Christian men that were taken from their families and brought in Istanbul and really raised with a very strict discipline to become soldiers. And were privileged. They had a whole series of privilege, but they had to be perfectly faithful to the Sultan. And at the end, they became so many that they had to relax the rules. But they were the group of soldiers that surrounded the Sultan. And I'm so sorry the sound didn't work. I forgot to check on the machine. Okay, we had some of it. And so this is the view that we have from the Topkapi, seeing on the Sea of Marmara, which goes then south through the Dardanelles. In the 18th century, the 19th century, sorry, the Sultan moved from Topkapi Palace to the Dolmabahce Palace that you see here. And that lasted until the war, literally. Then Ataturk put the capital in Ankara. What is interesting is that when I visited, Erdogan had come back to the Dolmabahce and was occupying part of it. And that was a sign he wants to become the Sultan again of the larger, geography, the Muslim geography in the Middle East. And it's a beautiful palace along the Bosphorus. There is also an amazing museum. Part of it's within the territory of the Topkapi, the archaeological museum. The facade that you see there was built as a testimony to the Greek culture at the time. But you find in here the Alexander sarcophagus. It's supposed to be the sarcophagus in which Alexander, the very young Alexander, was buried. In dates around 300 BCE. And then this is just an example because it's a large museum. You have sculptures and magnificent sarcophagi. An Egyptian Hittite peace treaty that goes back to 1258 BCE. Hittites is a whole culture that we tend to forget and that was extremely rich. And then finally, we went and visited the Korah church, which, as I mentioned before, used to be outside the walls of the city, the Roman walls, but then was integrated into it. And same thing as Hagia Sophia, but happened earlier, it has been turned into a mosque again. And this is again, the fear that the extraordinary mosaic that it is decorated with are not going to be as well taken care of. It has a very special plan that is pretty unique. As you can see, you have the naos, which is the central part of the church. It has two narthex, which is the entrance, that place of transition between the sacred ground of the naos and the outside. And then it has on the side a Pacha Ecclesion. So it's a church that is added on the side. And so we'll have a look at them, but mostly what we'll see is the extraordinary domes that we find in these two narthexes, and then the great frescoes in the Pacha Ecclesion. So these date back, so not too long before the invasion by the Ottomans, but two of the domes, you have the one with the Christ Pantocrator, so it's the ruler of all, and the Virgin Mary with child, the Theotokos, that you see there, and of course the drum of the dome is open with windows, so you can really appreciate the beauty of the mosaics. And then some incredible mosaics. It's really some of the nicest I've ever seen. The nativity scene there on the left, showing the wise women taking care of the child after birth, you know, where they bathe him, and the Virgin is laying down there, surrounded by angels who playing music. And then the opposite is the koimesis, which is the death of the Virgin. As you know, for a Christian, the Virgin didn't die, but she went into a certain condition and then was elevated during the Assumption to the heaven. And so you see here the Virgin who is in repose with the disciples around, the apostles around her, and Christ who is there, who is already gone normally, is taking her soul. The baby that you see in his arms is the soul of the Virgin that he's going to take up to heaven, and you have the seraph flying above. In the Esod Nachtexo, the inside you have the other Christ as the land of the living. And here is the Pacha Ecclesion. There is not much left in the naos itself, so we can't, I'll show you in a minute. But in the Pacha Ecclesion, there is extraordinary fresco there that shows Christ removing Adam from the tomb. He's taking him to the second coming of Christ, in fact, where he is just absolutely superb. The Anastasis. And in the another death of the Virgin in the Koimesis is the back of the naos. And then here's the naos, and I showed you both scenes. So this is the naos with nobody in. This is now as a mosque. They've added the mihrab there on the side, and they are occulting all the images. You see, they pull a drape, or they have kind of a screens that come down to hide any images during the service. And then finally, this is the end of the stay in Istanbul, and we are reaching the ship. As I give you 5 minutes to take a drink, stretch your legs, and then we go on to on the ship itself.
Yeah, all right, they just speak Israel and just keep distributing, but there's nobody getting.
Right, so, but by. 46 and saying, and. So like, that's not really biased, okay, and then you have to show your ID. Because that's something.
Reviewed my. Oh, yeah.
It's
2008.
As far as I know,
You know, reviewed my photos.
When you.
Been a few years.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I think that's the other one. She said. I think sure is right.
That's the ladies of the bathroom, continue talking. I should be from outside.
Okay.
I'm getting coffee, don't start yet.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. Yeah, right.
That's so big, Mark.
No.
I'm very grateful. Oh my God.
So like.
Let's go. Okay. I'll say it works for you.
Years. And then we took him.
Okay, if we could sit down.
Yes.
But you wanna get to the top.
Okay, we go on. So there we are, ready to board the ship. And this is, I think it was a great part of the trip, was the ship itself, because it's so beautiful. And we'll have some more images of it along the trip. So we were on the other side of the Bosphorus. And as you can see, it's not that big, but still pretty reasonable. The sea cloud, the original sea cloud, because this is sea cloud 2, but the original sea cloud was bought by Marjorie, was built for Marjorie Meriwether Post and her second husband, Edward Hutton. It was launched in 1931 with the name of Hussar V. At the time of her construction, she was the largest private yacht in the world. In 1935, the United States ambassador to the Soviet Union, Joseph E. Davis, married Marjorie Meriwether Post, and Mr. and Mrs. Davis renamed the ship Sea Cloud. Informal embassy as Soviet and United States officials stayed and met on the vessel. In 1941, they first offered the ship to the US Department of the Navy, but the Navy turned her down. And then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt objected to the ship entering service, remarking that she was too beautiful to be sacrificed. However, on January the 5th, 1942, the Navy reassessed their position, chartering the ship for $1 per year and refitted as a weather observation station vessel. The foremasts were removed and the hull painted battleship gray. In 1947, they reassembled the rigging and a new set of 29 sails in 1949. In 1955, Rafael Trujillo, ruler of the Dominican Republic, purchased the Sea Cloud and it became Angelica. In 1966, he sold it to the Operation Sea Cruises, Inc. And in 1969, Antarna, Inc. in Miami. And they sold it to the Hartmut Pasburg and Associates, which it still belongs to. The contract for the construction of this sea craft, so it was so successful, they decided to build another one that was very similar to the original sea craft. And so the contract for her construction as such was awarded to the Spanish shipbuilder Astilleros Gondan. And the keel laying was held there on the 24th of June, 1998. The rigging was planned and produced by Navicom in Wolgast, Germany. The 23 sails were made in Poland. The ship was eventually handed over to Sea Cloud Cruises on 29 December 2000. On the 22nd January 2001, the final work was completed and the Sea Cloud 2 was christened on the 6th February 2001 in Las Palmas, Canary Island. So you have an idea of the story. It's actually, we joined it because it was the Metropolitan Museum makes cruises on the ship from time to time. And so it was a great mix. I didn't want to be on a big ship, but that was good. And it's, you will see, it's absolutely a beautiful place. So this is us leaving. Istanbul is behind. You can see the skyline from far away, and on the left you see the Blue Mosque and then Hagia Sophia to the right of it. We went through the Dardanelles, and you cannot go through the Dardanelles without a tugboat. They guide you. It's narrow, and there's still sunken ships in there from the big battle of the Dardanelles during the war. So here you can see it's not a tugboat; it's a pilot. And so there they are, and they're saying goodbye. In 1915, the Allies sent a substantial invasion force of British, Indian, Australian, New Zealand, French, and Newfoundland troops to attempt to open up the straits that the Turks had shut off. In the Gallipoli campaign, Turkish troops trapped the Allies on the coast of the Gallipoli Peninsula. And the campaign did damage to the carrier at that time of Winston Churchill, and who was at that time the First Lord of the Admiralty. And he really had promoted the unsuccessful use of the Royal Navy to force open the straits. Ataturk served as a commander for the Ottomans during the land campaign. So this was a terrible back and forth and a lot of loss. Just to give you an idea, when the whole thing, the 8 months of fighting were over, the total Allied deaths included 43,000 Brits, 15,000 French, 8,700 Australian, 2,700 New Zealander, 1,300 Indians, and 49 Newfoundlanders. The total Turkish deaths were around 60,000. So it's a few 100,000 when you see that. It was really bad. So you go on from there and you come just before the Aegean Sea. And there you are in the Kanakkale. And Kanakkale has inherited, after we went by the way, so it's rather recent, they received the horse of Troy that was used in the movie Troy. And so it now stands just next to the sea and as a memory to the city that had been in the 19th century, dug up by Schliemann in the city now called Hisarlik. And he dug up a whole different levels. He mistakenly thought it was the 7th level, but it wasn't. And so there's still discussion exactly where Troy was, but there were actually 9 cities superposed that were built at the same place. And here, hopefully again, it's going to work as the others did work. Here is the moment we had twice during the trip, they dropped the sails. And you can see that it's still done, it's not done mechanically, but it's done with sailors going up. And within the sailors, there were 2 women, which was interesting too, because this is a training ship. And so the 2 women who were both university ladies that joined the boat for the ship for a year to train on how to be a sailor. And so you can see them going up.
A tightening mechanism, and the wires are tightened up onto the hull.
And again, I'm so sorry for the sound.
Pulling the masts into column or making them straight. Okay. So those shrouds that are the ones on the side, they're also.
So the sea cloud is a square rigger, as they call it, with foremast, mainmast, and mizzenmast. The top of the mainmast is 187 feet high.
They're responsible for the mainmast and the mizzenmast. The group up forward, the foremast group, they're responsible for the foremast and then the head rig.
So they have security lines so that they can
up and he's laying
put
out
on the
you can see he's wearing, if you look at everybody, there's like a technicolor group we have here. We got some reds, we got some chartreuse, some
you see that's a girl.
Frederick here is wearing fashionable blue. Okay. Anyway, that's his harness, and you can see that he's flipping and unclipping to some lines there. Frederick is letting go the gaskets was the lines that are tying that sail. The gaskets for the lower spanker, or the lower gaff. Other folks are climbing up.
And of course, they don't use the sail all the time because you can't time it properly.
Somebody up on the top, that's what that platform is called there.
Okay, we're gonna move to the next one where you can see some of them are already.
Okay, the one that's going back up is called the flume. That's the line that brings the sail back up when we want to strike them. It's great that we can set sails, and we can take our time usually setting sails. But striking sails, that means taking them in. We have to be able to do that very.
And then finally, here they're going to lower. And that's the girl again. She's a photography major.
Running on the forward edge instead, they're silhouette.
And this is it.
Amazing.
So absolutely superb. And I tell you, I had taken 3 or 4 books with me. I think I read 2 pages because I spent my time. You're so close to the water. And so you can always enjoy just the beauty of the ship, even without the sails, but just the way the water caresses, if you want, the hull. It's incredible. So the first stop was in Kusadasi/Ephesus, Kusadasi being the name now of Ephesus, which is was that very important city on the western coast of Turkey. You see, where am I? There. And here is a representation of how Ephesus looked. It was quite an extensive town. It was at the time the largest town on the western coast there, but had direct access to the sea. And unfortunately, the river that was feeding the harbor, if you want, was silted. And so finally, and we'll see how much it did. But you had everything. You had a beautiful theater, which is quite big, a large agora, and a whole series of temples and houses and buildings. They are right now digging up all the apartments. There was a whole series of apartments along, against the hills. And here is an idea. Here you can see on the left how it silted and really moved literally the coast of Ephesus much more to further away and cut it from the harbor. So here is another plan of Ephesus, and you can see that the port at that time was really reaching here, was an important commercial point, cultural point too. And but it was a very complete and comprehensive city, very beautiful, very celebrated, and as you know, very important when the birth of Christianity. As you know, Paul spent quite a bit of time there. And so you have an idea of how one of the main building that was so important was built here and was one of the seven wonders of the world. And this was the temple dedicated to Artemis. It was the largest one that had ever been built in her name. And what you see here is from the miniature park in Istanbul, where they recreated the architecture that existed before. Unfortunately, it burned down. The maniac literally came and burned down the temple. And this is all that's left of that incredible temple.
When did that happen?
In 356 BCE. So it's one of these crazy guys that came, and we see the stone, but inside you had fabrics and you had all kind of other things that were able to be ignited, and you had oils and so on. And so this is all. And once it was destroyed, the thing is then they recycle, they repurpose a lot of the stones. The people say, we're not going to leave that there. We can use it, we can reuse it for other purposes. And so that's why there is very little left. And actually, the temple that you saw was built over two other temples, smaller ones that existed before. So that place was occupied a long, long time ago. The way the statues of Artemis are very interesting. Artemis is Diana in Latin. In the Roman time, it was Diana. And so Artemis is, of course, the virgin goddess that was born on Delos, the sister of Apollo. And in that particular temple, she's represented that way. And this has been very often it's a look of fertility. Though she is virgin, but she's really the goddess of fertility. And people really were wondering what these shapes that were hanging from her torso were, and thought for a long time that they might be breasts, that were multiple breasts. By now, they believe they actually bull testes. And bull testes would be definitely a symbol of fertility. And there were many of these statues found, very large ones and then smaller ones. As far as Ephesus, you have a whole series of buildings. This is the gate, the gate of Augustus. And Ephesus was not built at once. There were many things that were added with the centuries. And here's a view seen from the beginning. You go down the Curator's Street all the way to the Celsius Library that you can see on the bottom. A whole series of houses and small temple. The Trajan Fountain, the Temple of Hadrian. And then on the left, they recently started digging up some apartment and villas. And it was absolutely fascinating because the decoration was wonderful. They had mosaic on the floor, they had frescoes on the wall at different periods of the Roman time. And then finally, of course, the Library of Celsus that was built by his son in his honor and was actually the third largest library that existed in that time, beside Pergamon and Alexandria. It has been, of course, it didn't stay the way you see it now all the time. It has been restored to that point. And then the beautiful theater that could house, I think it's up to 13,000 people. Also around there is a great cult of Mary that came with Christianity, and it is believed that Mary died in this little house, which is the house of Mary there. And there is down also, not too far, the cave of the 7 Youths of Ephesus that was found, and it's also believed to have contained the tomb of Mary Magdalene. But there are different legends of Mary Magdalene, so this is only one of them. And then you go back to Kusadasi and you have to attend one of the carpet demonstrations. But it was really interesting because you see here how they making silk. So you had the cocoons and the boiling of the cocoons and how they start threading the the thread that comes out of the cocoon, and the beautiful wools and the vegetable dyes there on the right. And these are wonderful because you have all that spectrum of colors is fascinating. And we did buy a carpet. The next stop, so we slept on that and we came to Bodrum, which was former Halicarnassus. And there you can see the difference of size between the cruise ship and the sea cloud. You can appreciate that it's, for me, it's a better scale. I like the smaller one. Halicarnassus was the place where was the famous mausoleum. The mausoleum of Halicarnassus, built by Mausolus, who was the chieftain, if you want, of the place, became a monument that was really admired by everybody. Unfortunately, 2 earthquakes took him down, and but it gave its name to a mausoleum. The term mausoleum comes from there, from mausoleus. You have the base, the basement, and then the pteron that's surrounded by column, then the pyramid, and on top of that you had a quadrige, 4 horses, and a statue of Mausolus. Here is the man, and here's what is left of it, which is always kind of a pity, but same thing. All these stones were repurposed. There too, you find a beautiful theater that was built pretty similarly to the one in Epidaurus in the Peloponnesus. A beautiful, typically Greek. It's kind of laying against the hill. That's the way the Greeks were building them. They were not self-standing as the Roman theaters are going to be. Very large scene, as you can see. And beautiful background, if you look at it. But in the 15th century, you have the castle of St. Peter was built there by the Knights Hospitalier, a huge castle that now houses, and this is a view from the castle, now houses the Museum of Underwater Archaeology. And so they do still some research, but they house a lot of the objects that have been found. And you can see also this enormous amount of amphorae that were found that were carried by these ships that were going from the Middle East to Egypt or to other places. You can see here the model of how they would store of the ship there, how they would store the goods and transport them. And here are some of the objects they found. Precious, they have some ores there, copper ores. And then we leave Turkey and we go to Greece. The first place is going to be Delos, the island at the top there, next to Mykonos. And again, same reflection when you arrive there, that island was such an important place for the culture, for the religion, for the economy. It was a very important harbor. And you look at that and you say, what? You know, it's really strange because it doesn't have any tree or barely anything as far as vegetation. You have lots of ruins, but it was a very important place indeed. This is the way Delos used to look, where they had, it was a very international place. You had all kinds of agoras for different cultures that lived together, that were mixed there. You have farm, you had temples. The water was a big thing, so they had cisterns to keep the water, and they must have been pretty good at consuming little water, because when you see a population, as you can estimate when you see this, with only 3 hills, they're not real mountains that are behind, and the rest is salted water. So you wonder where it was coming from. Hopefully it was raining often. You had a hippodrome, as you can see, you had a big theater on the right, and the alleys we will see. Here's what is left of Delos, lots of temple, but it's a very arid climate, as you can see. The Terrace of the Lion, so you had that whole series of lions that you were walking by on that alley. Here's an example of the house of the lake, where you have mosaic. All these houses had mosaic in the atrium. And then the theater, too, which is not as well kept as the other ones. And this is where finally we could get off the boat, but while in the water there, and we were able to see the boat, not be just in, but you could see the canoe, not the dinghies that they were bringing out. And we were able to go around the ship and take some pictures of them. So its overall length is 347 feet. The maximum beam is 52 feet, and her draught is described as 18 feet and 8 inches. It's equipped with 3 anchors weighing a total of 5,000 pounds. And you have 5 different bridges. It's called the most romantic sailing ship afloat, and I would agree with it. I second it. We were able to visit the cabin, and so this gives you the vessel's main power plants consist of 4-stroke diesel engines made by Krupp Maschinenbau GmbH, each developing 1240 kilowatts and at 900 revolutions per minute. And so from there we go to Santorini. Santorini Terra. Terra is the modern name, and was actually the old name before it was renamed in Italian, Santa Irini, and Santorini comes from there. We arrived there at 6 o'clock in the morning, so there was a slight haze when we arrived. As you know, Santorini is the result of a big volcanic eruption that really blew the center of the island off. And this is the view that you have from the ship when you arrived at Caldera, the big cliff. and all the white houses at the top. As you know, at the beginning of February 2025, hundreds of minor earthquakes up to magnitude 5 near Santorini, just next to Santorini. And everybody was supposed to evacuate Santorini, and they did, and they closed the island. I haven't heard anything since, so it seems to have quieted down. It was not a volcanic phenomenon, but a tectonic phenomenon. So the plaque that were moving, not. So Fira is the name of the main town in Santorini. The name, as you can see, went from Caliste, which means pretty, from Strongyé, and then Santorini, Santa Irini, and Thera is the name now, official name of the island. And here you have a view of all these superposed houses. It's extremely picturesque. They have a way, because it's all what you have on top of the island is a lot of pumice. It's all due still to the eruption. They have rooms that are really dug into the pumice. So in summer, they have no windows, but it's cool. And so a lot of these houses have their special room in the pumice. At the very southern point of Santorini, they have done some digging. It's called Akrotiri, that was abandoned in the 16th century BCE. And it's absolutely extraordinary. Unfortunately, when we were there, we couldn't go and see it because the roof that protects the ruins had collapsed. And so we couldn't, it was not open to the public. But you have a reconstruction of all what they have found there on the right. And they found houses in incredibly good condition with amazing frescoes, as you can see there. They're just superb, very good condition, and show, for example, the saffron gatherers. And these were probably coming of age because saffron has some, how do you call again, awakened qualities sexually. And so probably it was offered to young women who were coming of age as a future. And then the one at the Minan city, all the way at the right, there's a whole series of these show the ships going from one point to the other, and you have ships with obviously for rulers that are much more elaborate than others, but very realistic. And then we leave the islands and we arrive in Peloponnesus. The big city there is Nauplion, which had a role during the independence days of Greece. It was for a while the capital of Greece before, in the process of liberation from the Turks. And we then did all the megalithic citadels, if you want. So there is a culture there that is a Mycenaean culture where you have different strongholds that were built, that were the center of cities, and that were built with incredibly large stones. And we still wonder how they were able to build it because of the sheer weight. So this is the Cyclopean walls of Tiryns stronghold, the first one there, and you see these hallways that go from one to the other. So these are, of course, they're not arches. They prior to the invention of the arches. And then finally, Mycenae, so it's a little further in, though again, the water receded. The water was going much more inland. And so it was closer to the water, but you see the hill there where the palace was built all the way on the top. It was dug in by Heinrich Schliemann, who had a second wife, Sophia, that is there, by the way, dressed with and adorned with the jewelry that they found in Troy. And so she was a Greek woman. His first wife was German, and it's the no, Russian. Sorry, his first wife was Russian, and here she's. This is the house that they had in Athens, that has become the numismatic museum of Athens. Schliemann, who was born in Germany, was started really on a very modest, in a very modest way, but was always interested in Homer and all his writing. And he was absolutely persuaded that Homer was not just telling hogwash, but was really reflecting the truth. And he followed the reading of Homer and started, that's how he went to Isarlik and tried to dug up Troy, but also he had heard of Mycenae. And here you can see the citadel with the what used to be the palace on the top. Here's the way it would have looked, with the circle A that you see at the bottom there, and the gate. You have the little pass there that we'll see the gate in a minute. So an important citadel with a lot of agricultural possibilities around, and probably little huts for the modest hard workers. But this is the famous Cyclopean walls and the famous lions that you see there on either side, the lion gates. And most of the gates will see these triangular shape, which are part of the architecture process, way filled in by that kind of images. This used to be the Megaron, which was the main room of the palace. This is all is left of it. It would have looked about like this. And then the main thing is, it's very often it's the jewelry and so on are found in graves. And in Mycenae, they had circles, and in there you had shafts. And on each shaft you had some stelae, some stones that were marking each of the graves. And they found about 10 in Circle A, with very rich jewelry and other masks and so on, including the funerary mask, wrongly named Agamemnon because it's earlier than Agamemnon. Agamemnon dates back about 1400 BCE, at the time of the War of Troy. This is a little older. And then the dagger, but they have found many, many more things. Below Mycenae is the two tombs that are quite interesting. The treasury of Atreus, Atreus being the founder of the dynasty of Agamemnon. They were the Atreides. And so this is an amazing, very large. I don't know if you see, there's two people down below there. So it gives you an idea of the scale. And again, it's not a dome. How do you call that when it's... It goes kind of pointed at the top, so it's not it's before the domes. But you see that same triangular space on top of the door that would have been filled with some sculpture. Here's more or less the way these tombs were, and they had been emptied by the time Schliemann and so on came. So there was nothing left in it. The treasure, there must have been an amazing treasure, but that was it. And so this is what concluded the trip. We came to Athens, but we didn't stay in Athens. No, we both had been to Athens a couple of times. But we were able to see the Acropolis, which was amazing because a few years ago, it was always in a kind of a fog. And they have really worked on the ecology, if you want, of the city. And so the pollution has diminished quite a bit, and you could see it clearly when we left it. So this was our trip from Istanbul to Athens. And thank you for listening.
Nice to meet you, Lynn.
And the next one will be on August 19th, the Silk Roads.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Hold on a second.
I'd be afraid to. At first, you know, very. After that.